Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Rhee and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset. All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen. I'm here with Dr. and Coach Sam Rhee. We are just days out from the 2022 NOBULL CrossFit Games. It's going to be held in Madison, Wisconsin. And we just wanted to touch on, maybe we can call it a little bit of a preview of the CrossFit Games. We're not necessarily going to get into like our picks and analysis of athletes, but we're going to get into some of the background, the storylines that I think would be cool to know about if you go in and watch the games. The games are very entertaining to watch, but as we were just saying, it's a really difficult sport to watch live. It's nothing like baseball, basketball, football, where you can just commit to a 3-hour window and watch an entire game. The CrossFit Games they start on Wednesday, that is August 3rd, and it goes through Sunday, August 7th. And they are essentially from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., almost all of those days. No one is going to sit down for 12 hours, even you CrossFit diehards. It's a really hard thing to watch over and over because you have different heats and then you have all the time in between heats and you're watching the same NOBULL commercials over and over in between the heats. But what I like to do, I rarely watch the CrossFit Games live. What I usually do is I go back at some point, whether it's the day of or the day after, and I try to look for certain heats. There are certain heats and certain workouts that I'm really interested in watching, and you can do that once all the workouts will be out at some course at some point during the week/weekend, and you can kind of see like, oh, I really want to watch that workout. That workout looks like something that's going to be a tight race. I want to watch that. So you can scroll your way through it. But let's just go over some of the options you have to watch. They really do a nice job of widening the lens here. Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Thursday 10 a.m. to 7:15 p.m. All of these times are Eastern, by the way. Okay. Friday 10 a.m. to 8:15 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9:20 p.m. And then last but not least, Sunday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And just FYI, on Sunday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time, it's going to be live on CBS. I think not CBS Sports, actual CBS. Cool. Which is really cool. It's always a different feel when you watch something like, when you're watching something streamed online or the CrossFit Games website, like, oh, this is cool. But when it's on a main network like that, it kind of legitimizes a little bit, and you know that some of your friends, like I bet a lot of you CrossFitters are going to get texts like, is this what you guys do? And yeah, I do that, yeah. Sam, are you looking forward to the games this year, and are you going to be able to watch?
Yeah, I won't be there like I was last year. I actually attended last year.
That's true.
And I will say, it's so many events, so many different divisions, so much to watch that even when you're there, it's really hard to watch it all. You have to pick and choose just like you do when you're at home. Mm-hmm. I found it to be an amazing event to attend live, and I'm not sure where they're going to be next year.
I believe next year is Madison.
Again?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the last year that'll be Madison for sure next year.
Yep.
But I would highly recommend attending if you can. If you get there early, a lot of the big names are just kind of milling around early. Not the active athletes. Those active athletes are all...
Yeah, get away from me.
Yeah, they're all hidden in their compound, but there are a lot of celebrities and other big CrossFit names that you could hang out and see, talk to.
It's like a big fitness fair.
It is a big fitness, yes. Yeah. And so I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to, like you said, a bunch of the big themes, some of the storylines that I've been following this year. I feel like as a casual watcher, this year has had a lot of content. I mean, with Savan podcast and Morning Chalk Up and Hiller, like I've consumed way more CrossFit sport content this year than I ever have before leading up to the games. And I don't know if other people have too, but there are definitely some things that I'm really excited to watch happen.
Yeah. So let's get into a few of these storylines to watch. And again, I know some of these guys that listen to us, maybe you don't watch the games, or maybe this will be the first one to watch. As a CrossFitter, I think it's really cool to watch this kind of stuff because if you did the CrossFit Open, this is how all of these athletes that you're seeing on your TV, that's where their season started. They all did 22.1. They all did 22.2. They all did 22.3. Then they qualified for the online quarterfinal. We had a few people from here do that. And then they qualified for the live semifinals. We had Joe Piero on from that. And
now people did the age group online semifinal as well.
Yep. We had several athletes do the age groups, and we'll get into that part of our storyline as well. But it's just, I've always found it like a really unique sport that you don't get this in other pro sports right now, that we all started off at the same stage in the middle of March. And this is like the World Series / Super Bowl of the CrossFit sport. So we can't go into talking about the games without, I think, the biggest storyline of all, and this is going to be the first ever CrossFit Games without Dave Castro involved. And when I say involved, yes, he programmed all the games previously, but we're talking about everything else he had his hand on. And all of a sudden, we did a couple podcasts on this previously, that this was a big story. He got fired. Now he's rehired, but he even said on a podcast that he's not going to be at the games unless he's mandated to be there by someone that's over him in CrossFit. And what are you expecting? Are you expecting any differences that we could see from a spectator standpoint that Dave Castro will not be there?
Adrian Bosman was on, I think, the Savan podcast, and he said he on purpose did not reach out to Dave Castro because it was, he said, too soon. Almost like mourning. I'm not sure. There was an emotional aspect to it. He said he didn't want to get him involved in something that he, like you said, had birthed, gotten off the ground, and made the games what they were. So this is all Adrian Bosman. And the way he talked about it was, he talked a little bit about his creative process and how he develops the games. And they're not that different, maybe, the way he has a think tank and he comes up with some of these ideas in his head and then he tests them and farms them out and experiments. It's interesting. They asked Patrick Vellner what he thought the games might be like under Boz versus Castro. And he thought Boz likes testing people where they have to make some choices in a workout. So do you go hard here and then go and ease up here? Like little decisions that can determine the outcome of the event.
Yeah.
While he felt Dave Castro sometimes just wanted to grind it out, and it was more of a who wanted it more during the workout. And I thought that was an interesting perspective.
That's a really interesting perspective. Yeah, the programming is definitely going to have a different flavor, and I will not say better or worse. Like if I stopped programming at Bison and we had Mike Delator take over, it wouldn't be better programming or worse programming. It would just be, it would have a different flavor to it. And I could even see in the quarterfinal stage and the age group semifinal stage, which Boz programmed both of those, that I loved the programming.
It was awesome.
It was just like a really well-balanced test. And it had what I love about Boz, what a lot of people don't know about this. He's been around from the beginning, pretty much. All right. He's like one of the true OGs of CrossFit. One of the true OGs of CrossFit Games from a judging perspective, programming perspective. And I love it when they throw a workout from the past into the current test of the fittest in the world. For example, in the age group semifinals this year, that first workout, the row bench press, that was a .com workout from 2008. And very few people know. I would even say very few people care about that. But if you're really into like the history of CrossFit and you do your reading on the CrossFit Journal and you really look back at stuff, that there's so much that changes about CrossFit and programming in the games. But I love when you're able to go back to the core of CrossFit, and I think Boz has like that special feel to it. And I think if you're like an OG CrossFitter, that someone that's been doing it for, I don't know, I mean, what is OG? And I mean, it's all subjective, but 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I think that you should have a true appreciation for the workouts.
I feel like there are two things I would expect. One is some kind of new implement.
Yep.
I'm not sure what. Like they've brought the pig out. They've had different other things. And then I think they're going to want to showcase that 2-hour window with something really cool and feature these athletes and make them look good.
Yep.
And so I'm going to be watching that CBS broadcast really carefully because I feel like they feel like that's a one shot to really make an impact.
Yeah, that's a really great point. What we see on Sunday will be something that CrossFit really wanted the world to see. And because I mean, CrossFitters are going to be on the YouTube channel, on the CrossFit Games website watching it, but on a Sunday afternoon, that's a prime hour right there that a lot of people are just sitting at home with that Channel 2 on, and all of a sudden the CrossFit Games come on. You want to make sure it's something that properly displays what these athletes can do, but nothing over the top. Right. Nothing like upside down ring handstand push-ups or something like that. But
no Ninja Warriors stuff.
Yeah. I remember one of my first games ever watching was on a Sunday afternoon. This is back when ESPN had that contract, and they had I want to say it was the top 30 or top 21 guys. And they had them do 3 benchmark CrossFit girl workouts with about 10 minutes in between because they had the girls guy, then they got guys go, girls go, guys go, girls go. And they had them do Elizabeth, Fran, and Isabel. And it was like, that's a nice, if you think about those 3 workouts, that's a really, in terms of movement patterns and what the athletes are physically and visually doing, it really showed me like, oh, that's what this is. Right? So some lifting, some gymnastics, fast stuff, funny looking pull-ups, all this stuff. And I think that's a good point. That's something we should all look for. If you can't really get to watch the games that much during the week, try to get in front of that TV Sunday, because it's going to be a fun watch no matter what it is.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, now that Dave Castro's out, let's get into some of just the kind of maybe some of the athlete talk, some of the backstories. I mean, you can talk about who do we think is going to win. Like, sure, Tia's going to win for the girls. I mean, is it 5 years in a row now?
Yeah, it's funny. I just watched an old video from 2016 when she placed second and Katrin Davidsdottir was first.
Yep.
And she's just crying and weeping. And you forget these people have arcs and storylines.
Yeah.
And she didn't come dominating number one every year.
Yep.
She learned how to do that.
Yep.
And she ain't going to give that up for a long time. And when you see those old stories and you think about how good she is now, you realize what kind of growth she's had. Yeah,
she's taken adversity, which we've talked about a lot here, is she's taken adversity and use it as fuel, not as something that pumped the brakes on her. And her and her coach Shane Orr, who is also husband, right?
Yep.
They do as good a job as anyone in terms of, in my opinion, just watching them train from my outsider perspective of really peeking at the games, right? Because this year, I think this was the first time she's gone in and out of CrossFit training throughout the off season. She was an Olympic weightlifter, very accomplished. She made the Olympics in Brazil, right? Or Pan Am Games.
Yeah, for lifting, yes, she made the Olympics for lifting.
Yeah, and this past year, she was on a bobsled team.
Yeah, but she didn't make it because she was an alternate, or there was some picking politics or something.
I remember seeing it. I'm like, wait a second, is she out of CrossFit now? And it's really, what I liked about it was this girl had no bobsled experience whatsoever, but she was so fit from the program that CrossFit gave her and competing in the sport that they basically just handpicked her and a couple of other former and current big names in the sport of CrossFit on the female side, Kelsey Keel, Colleen Fosh. They all had this look at, they were steps away, moments away from being in the Olympics. And yes, I'm sure there's some politics behind who's on the team and whatnot, but I like the idea that she gets away from CrossFit for X amount of time. Was it 2 months? Was it 3 months? And then she comes back in and you don't lose. And we've been talking about this. I just listened to Sam's podcast on Botox and Burpees with Stacey Marino about, yes, there are times, especially if you're in the sport, you need to almost walk away from it for a little bit. And that doesn't mean walk away from exercise and training, but to switch it up, to keep your body healthy, to keep your mind stimulated and clean. There's a lot of advantages to that. But this is the first games where I've seen that out of her, where she was in a bobsled training more than CrossFit. And I don't think it's going to make any impact, but it'll be something to look for.
Her mental game is so strong. She probably has more pressure now than she did ever just to keep going. And, people are always rooting for the underdog. So everyone's like, yeah, Tia, boring.
Yeah.
And that's hard to fight against. And I respect Tia so much for being that dominant force when, all these young hotnesses are out there and the storylines. Like, how much Tia have they actually featured in all of these documentaries?
Yeah.
I just see all the hot new athletes that are in there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that makes me respect Tia more, is just how good she's been for so long.
Yeah, it's just about winning with her, nothing else. Another storyline that I think the most intriguing storyline of CrossFit Games to keep an eye on is Danielle Brandon. She was an athlete under Underdogs Athletics, under Justin Kotler. I would say she was probably, they had a few big-time girls. Carrie Pierce was there, Bethany Shadburn, but I think Danielle Brandon, over the past, I would say 12 months, has really escalated to one of the most popular female CrossFitters in the world, right?
Absolutely. She exploded on the CrossFit Games last year. Her story was so compelling because if you remember, Shadburn and Pierce could not compete. COVID.
Yep.
They isolated her. They put a mask on her. She had to compete in a separate lane last year, and she took it and she ran with it, and she was a rebel, which the audience loves. She gave the middle finger right in the middle of like broadcast and with the colored hair. And she's so dynamic and so charismatic.
And she's tall, like big, tall, strong as hell.
And so she performed great, and she has a lot of skill sets that some of the other athletes don't have in terms of gymnastics.
Yep.
And so she exploded, and she's been on a tear this year.
Yeah. And I think she's going to come in with some attitude. But the big storyline behind this is not just what Sam talked about, even though that is enough of a storyline that she does not have to compete under this COVID umbrella like she did last year. She left her coach, I want to say about a month ago.
Yep.
3 to 4 weeks ago.
3 to 4 weeks ago.
And it's funny how with Savan and Hiller, the more gossipy side of CrossFit is starting to make waves. And some people don't like that. Some people do. But Dave Castro said it best that you want as much media talking about your sport as possible, whether it's good or bad, right? Stephen A. Smith has made a killing, millions of dollars off of making an ass out of himself talking about sports. But that it's all about the clicks. It's all about the attention. And I think that all this attention, these backstories that bring to the public light, it's great for the sport. And so a lot of this story got a lot of publicity from that. They had Danielle Brandon on Savan, and she's pretty hush-hush with what actually happened. But it sounds like there was a pretty strong disconnect, strong enough that she would leave her coach just moments away from the games, which is unheard of. I've never heard of it. I've heard of athletes changing coaches and programs, but not this close to the games.
You know, the thing about Danielle Brandon, I think this is also what makes her so appealing, is that everyone knows what a physical talent she is, but the knock on her is that her mental game...
Yeah, and that's something she says about herself as well.
...is inconsistent.
Yeah.
And remember, in semis, she took first place.
Yeah.
Clearly, her training up until that point had been really great.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, there was some sort of interpersonal or relationship type of issue that occurred that resulted in her leaving,
right,
training with Matt Torres, training with Dallin Pepper.
Yep, brute strength down in Florida.
And when you listen to them on these podcasts, you have to try to keep reading between the lines to try to figure out what the deal is.
No one's really spilling the beans.
Yeah, and so everyone's like, was there some sort of relationships that were going on in this big underdogs camp that sort of ruined it? Was Kotler not paying enough attention to her? You know, it's really weird. And you always try to figure out stuff. And I was watching the video of the semis, and every time she finished, she would go and hug Kotler. So there's definitely a very close, like,
for sure,
daughter-father relationship there.
Yep.
And knowing Brandon talking about her growing up and how difficult it was and how broken her home was, you can sort of see how important relationships are to her.
Yeah, that father figure.
Yes. And so you speculate, was there some issue there? You're not sure. But they brought in a bunch of new athletes.
My guess is that it was originally basically Danielle Brandon, Bethany Shadburn, and Carrie Pierce.
Nice family.
Yeah, and they got to train each other, push each other. They were very vocal about that last year. Like that, I think all three of them won their respective semifinal.
They went 1, 2, 3.
Well, in the same semifinal. Right. Yeah, so all
West
three,
Coast Classic.
Yeah, all three went to the same semifinal, and they came in first, second, and third. And they all trained together, right? And I think in the past, since this year's semifinals, I want to say they have probably 10 athletes under them that are either at the games or at semifinals. So,
and Shadburn is out because of injury.
Yep.
Carrie Pierce retired.
Yep.
So that unit is no longer together.
Right. And it just seems a lot of new blood there. I mean, we can't assume there was a relationship problem with Danielle Brandon and Justin Kotler. It could have been another issue within the gym, within their training group, that just created a toxic environment that she knew would not be good for her.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, who joined? Gerrard?
Gerrard. Yeah, the girl. I don't know all these girls, all their names, but the girl that made it from Granite Games in 5th place, she's a young girl. I think she's 21 years old.
Right. I will say it seems like she's very close now with Dallin Pepper. And I think it seems like she wants to train with him the way Tia Clair Toomey and Matt Frazier train, sort of together, like complementing each other, pushing each other.
Yeah.
And I've listened to a fair amount to Matt Torres, the brute strength guy. And he's a really thoughtful,
solid dude,
articulate, smart coach.
Yep.
And he seems very honest, very straightforward. And I feel like she found a place where she felt more comfortable, even though she wasn't necessarily looking to leave. And so, yeah, that's a huge story. What's this going to do for her training? How is she going to perform? What's going to happen?
Like if she struggles, if she really starts to fall apart a little bit, do you blame it on this situation, or do you say it was the whole past year, or vice versa? If she excels and does well and finishes on the podium, or dare I even say beat Tia, does Justin Kotler and Underdogs Athletic get any of the credit, or does it brute strength made her turn the corner?
I mean, it's probably a little mix of everything, right?
Yeah, right. So that's something I just think is be really interesting to keep an eye on, and you want to see her do well early on, because I think that just knowing what she has said about her mindset and competing, if she gets herself in a hole early on in those first 2-3 days, or I should say first 2 to 3 events, even though you have a lot of margin to make up from there, you don't know if you don't have that coach relationship, the person that's been in your corner for so long, that could really send you down the funnel even further. So I hope for her sake she gets a nice strong start.
I think she's a fighter, and I'm rooting for her, whether she starts off hot or gets slow. I know a lot of people feel the same way. They're going to be rooting for her all the way.
So let's shift to the guys. I think the biggest storyline on the guys' side is without a doubt Ricky Gerrard. Ricky Gerrard, for those that don't know, he finished in second place.
Yep. Third place in 2017. I think it was their first year in Madison. 17 or 18, I can't remember.
Okay, 17 or 18, and he popped for a drug test, and that was...
It was a 5-year suspension, right?
5 years, so it had to have been 2017.
Yep.
Yeah. So he failed his drug test after finishing on the podium, and that was the biggest, I would say, drug test pop that we've seen in the sport ever. Someone that actually finished on the podium in the open division, and... I actually remember when he failed his drug test, like almost everyone's like, oh, tainted supplements. But he eventually started saying, he came out after his initial decline that it was true, that he's like, yep, I took this.
Yes.
And I actually gave him some respect for that. I mean, you still cheated, and that still puts you in that certain category. But he was really, I didn't love how he acted after. He was very adamant that he was still better than Matt Frazier, and that eventually after his suspension was over, he would come back and beat Matt. And I remember him doing the workouts, the CrossFit Games workouts at his gym, in the comfort of his gym, no judges, no other opponents next to him. And he would beat Matt Frazier's times and like flip the double bird at the camera, that kind of stuff. Like that was, I feel like, the first 2 years of his drug suspension. And since then, though, the times that I've listened to him, he's really been humbled by this whole thing. And I'm really looking forward to, I don't think he's going to come out of nowhere and win the games. Like he wasn't that overly impressive at his semifinal. Impressive enough to make the games, but I wouldn't call him one of the top 10 guys in the division, but I am very curious to see where he ends up.
I think he went through the 7 stages after the games and his pop and so yeah, he flexed a lot. He was very angry, but I think over the past year or so, he's followed this path to contrition. He's spoken more honestly about it to a certain degree. And his performance does speak for himself. I mean, he's really come on strong over the past several competitions. I think there was a lot of drama at the time because Vellner got knocked to 4th, and then he got bumped back up to 3rd. But there was a lot of anger because he didn't get to sit up on the podium. Yeah. There was no celebration of Vellner's podiuming.
Right.
And I just recently listened to Vellner on a podcast, and he said, listen, I think he wants to talk to Gerrard. I think he wants to just say, hey, we're good, because he hasn't talked to him at all.
Okay.
But he said, if we have an opportunity and we can just say, hey, listen, everything's cool.
Yeah.
He said, that's great. What he doesn't want to do is make it a freaking camera fest where there's like 15,000 people watching and televising it. He says he doesn't want that. And so I think it speaks to the fact that there are no hard feelings. Everyone that you speak to on the corporate side of CrossFit sport has basically said he served his suspension.
Yeah.
He paid his penalty.
Yeah.
We want him to do as well as he possibly can.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of those spoilers. I don't think he's going to win, but he can certainly, and this is what Vellner hopes, create some space between the top athletes and the mid-level athletes in any given event.
Yep.
And you need a lot of jostling of positions in order for those points to be mixed up, which is what Medeiros and Vellner had a problem with chasing Justin Medeiros last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, you always have to remember when you're watching the games or tracking the leaderboard, you don't need to win a lot of events. You really can win the games without winning one event. And I remember that was more of like a Rich Froning thing. He always got off to a bad start. Like this has been well documented that in the early days of him winning the games, he was never really that good at the endurance events until he got involved with a good friend of the Herd Fit podcast, Christian Shaw. Once he started getting coached by him, his endurance game started getting much better. But I remember watching the games early on, and Froning would always start well behind the pack. He would always do well poorly in those first couple events. And then from there on out, he would have like a third place, a fifth place, a second place, a fourth place, a first place, a fourth place. And then you're like, this guy's winning the games by 100 points, and he didn't win. He's not the best at anything. And that really is what gets exposed in CrossFit competition. You never need to be the best. You just can't have a major weakness, or I would say more than one major weakness. But what really helps someone that is constantly coming in fourth place, third place, second place are the other guys, these specialty guys like Ricky Gerrard in this example that we're talking about right now. He gets in between a guy like Patrick Vellner and Justin Medeiros. And Patrick Vellner is one of my guys that I hope he wins. And I think if you're going to say pick someone other than Justin Medeiros to win on the men's side, I am going to pick Vellner because he's just always right there. And I think he's someone like Tia that I think he takes all the adversity that he hits. He takes it in stride and he uses it as fuel. But like you said, there's going to need to be a lot. I would say a handful of events where he's going to need to finish 3, 4, 5 spots ahead of Medeiros. And that means 3, 4, 5 guys need to get in between him and Medeiros. And I think Gerrard can do that for a few events.
The other one that can do that is also new to the CrossFit Games, but not new to the news of the CrossFit Games, which is Roman Khrennikov, who has had so many difficulties getting to the U.S. and competing. He's a machine guy in the sense that he is such an animal on anything with brute effort.
Yep.
And these are the kind of workouts I'm so interested to see and just see what this guy can do. I think a lot of people want to just see him grind it out and perform it at an insane level.
Right. His capacity is probably top 3 in the men's field.
Yeah, and I saw him a little bit in one of the Dubai competitions, and he was so impressive. So those are the kind of things that when you watch the games and a little bit of that kind of backstory, you watch it with a little bit more excitement.
Yeah.
And for me, it is Vellner all the way. He's my sentimental favorite for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One is he's on the older side. He's so smart, I think, in terms of how he thinks and trains. And he is so matter of fact, too. He's Canadian, so he's very self-effacing. He's low-key. But when you hear him talk, you can hear the competitor inside him. You don't necessarily see it on a superficial level, but you know it's right there. And that guy is just as tough and saying F you to everyone else as anyone else is, even though he looks like...
I love when they talk like that, too, because, again, we don't know Vellner personally, but we've heard him talk enough and he's been around for so long. He's a good person. He's a good human being. But when they get into the competition field, it is, almost literally trying to rip each other's heads off. And there's no sympathy. If someone gets hurt, they're not going to stop. Like that kind of stuff. And I love listening to people because I love it when you're able to turn that switch in the middle of a workout or right before an event and go from, hey, good human being to I will kill your puppy. So let's talk about a macro level, big picture, guys and girls. You could probably go into the teams a little bit here, but the new versus the old. We just used the term old for Patrick Vellner. He's 32. Like, what does that make us? But that is old. If you took the average age of every athlete at the games, 32 is one of the oldest ones there. And very impressive that he's still considered one of the favorites. But if you follow sports, this is something I think some CrossFitters that don't follow sports have a little bit of a disconnect from. Age is a big deal when you're talking about the highest level, right? I don't want to get into age being a big deal at our box, right? We always kind of push against using your age as an excuse. But if you are competing and you are trying to get to the highest level, which this is the Super Bowl of the CrossFit sport, you have to know that age and biology catch up to your favorite athletes, no matter who they are. And we have a lot of new athletes that are in their teens, low 20s coming up into this field. And now they're competing against people that we've been watching for almost a decade. And you get wrapped up into, oh, these people are untouchable. No, it's Patrick Vellner. It's Sarah Sigmundsdottir. It's Katrin. No. They're the best. And it's just factually wrong. And it's not because they don't work hard. It's not because they've had life changes. Maybe they have. But I think the competition field gets younger and younger every year. And that's harder to compete against. But that is sport. Watch it in any sport. I mean, Katrin and Sarah Sigmundsdottir, they're not in it this year.
They didn't make it.
And a lot of people are shocked by it. Even some of these people from Savant's podcast, and I wasn't surprised at all because I watched her at Wodapalooza, and she's more impressive than anyone I know, but compared to the rest of the field, she just wasn't there. Thoughts on the young versus the old? We can get into a few names that we'll be looking for, but just macro level, the new versus the old. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing is that the performance at the games has increased every year. If you go back and watch anything from 3, 4, 5 years ago, and then you watch it like how they're performing now, listen, just like from our standpoint, what a good time at Grace was like 5 or 6 years ago, and what a decent time in Grace is now. It's changed.
It's changed a lot.
And it's changed on the sports side too, big time. So when you see, for me on the young side, I'm really interested in Mal O'Brien, who's now coached by Matt Frazier. And to me, it feels like Mal O'Brien is playing with house money because she just got a new coach, Matt Frazier, who's awesome, right? Supposedly. And she's very young. And if she knocks off some of these established athletes or even a Tia, that's awesome. But if she doesn't, they'll say, what? She's 18 years old. This is the first year with Matt Frazier. What do you expect? You just have to wait for the long term. The one established athlete that I'm interested in is Brooke Wells because I saw her rip her elbow ligaments to shreds last year.
In the middle of a snatch.
On that heavy snatch. Oh my God, that was
I can't
awful.
believe she's back this soon, man.
It's amazing. And I don't know where she's going to sit, but she's a proven athlete. She's in that group. And I really hope that emotionally, I really want her to do well.
And I'm curious to see if they test a heavy snatch, which I'm sure they will at some point. I don't want to say it definitively. They do like to switch it up year to year, but I have to think at some point a heavy snatch will be tested. And I'm curious to see if there's any hesitation. I'm sure she's trained it, but it's different training it in a controlled environment and doing it over the course of games weekend where your body starts to break down. I hope that she can really put the blinders on and be able to kind of overcome that. I think that's like the last step of overcoming a past injury is that big, heavy max effort lift that you got hurt on. That's like the final step to recovery.
On the team side, I will say last year I didn't watch a lot of team stuff. There's so much to watch when you're there in person that I sort of skipped a lot of the team stuff. This year I will be watching the Annie versus Rich competition. Rich Froning versus Annie and her crew from Reykjavik. I mean, I think the consensus is that Rich Froning has the two best women athletes. He had a big upgrade with that Sam Cornier. And those guys are going to be dominating. This is first year that Annie has Con Porter and Tola, I forget his last name. Lauren Fisher's a great athlete, but she's not in the class of those two monsters that Rich Froning has. So, but listen, Annie is so gritty. She is she shocked everyone last year. She was the shock of the games last year, finishing on the podium. Finished podium after a year after having a baby. I watched a fair amount of her content on YouTube, and those guys are in it to win it. For sure. If there is a single 1 or 2 missteps by Mayhem, which can happen, they've 2017 they finished second. With Adrian Conway's team winning. Just then they've gone on an absolute tear. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. No, you don't. And these guys are gamers, right? And I think they're all pretty close fitness level. I think what makes Rich and his team so good is they train together all year. They don't just start training together in January. They train together all year and they know each other so well, but they execute. It's fun watching the team stuff because everyone there is elite. Like there's no questioning that. But Rich and his team, they just stand out because they execute so well. And I think that's the one advantage they have over the Reykjavik team is that they've been with each other for a long time. And that time, that chemistry, it means a lot. And this is like, we see this in free agency and sports all the time. Like sometimes you can get the best athletes from all these different teams to come onto your team, but chemistry means something, especially when there's this kind of competition with a lot of synchro work and pacing work. But I do think this is going to be the biggest run that they've had, the biggest competition they've had since that time they came in second place. It's going to make for good TV watching for sure, I think. Now, on the guys' side, the one young guy I'm really looking forward to watching is also competing with Mayhem. It's Guy. Oh, yeah. I never want to say his name because I'm always afraid of getting names wrong. But he was the teen sensation from the CrossFit Games, I think dating back to 2018, and I remember watching him as a 15-year-old. He was snatching like 245, and I'm like, and it looked better than most of the Games athletes. And now he's one of the, if not the strongest snatcher or Olympic lifter at the Games. He's on the young side too right now. I'm going to get his age real quick, but Sam, do you have any thoughts on him? Do you think someone like that has a realistic shot at coming out of? He competed in the South American semifinal, and no disrespect to anyone that competed down there, but it's not the same as competing at the Granite Games with what Joe competed against, right? So I feel like he's a little bit of an unknown. He was at the Games last year. He did have some ups and downs,
but with another year of seasoning with Fritz Froning and the crew at Mayhem, and just having that 1 year of experience under his belt probably means a lot. Any thoughts there on what he could do or how much noise he can make?
Well, we saw last year what his talent was. It was lifting, and he is, if you haven't watched him lift, you must see him lift. It is amazing, amazing. His lift technique and his style is so smooth. It's unlike anyone else.
Speed.
Yeah, that I've ever seen in CrossFit. So you know that he got what? When he trained with Mayhem, what do you get? A ton of volume.
Yep.
And a lot of mental toughness.
Yes.
So what does a year of a crap load of volume and mental toughness up the wazoo from Rich Froning get you? Let's see. I don't know.
He was 7th last year. I didn't know he was top 10. Yeah. I mean, I really do think that he has a realistic shot at passing those guys that were between him, like guys like Noah Olson and Brent Fikowski. Again, guys that I have so much respect for and guys I've been watching for so long and look up to as an athlete. But everyone has their time. And I think if he hits everything correctly this year and he's healthy and he stays healthy, I think we're going to see him on the podium at the end of this thing.
Could be, for sure.
That's going to be my guy prediction there. Let's shift our focus over to the Masters and the age groups, because I think that's something that's pretty enticing for us personally to watch. But a lot of the people that listen to this podcast either competed in quarterfinals or maybe a few competed in semifinals, had the dreams of making it there someday. It's really fun to watch those because for a couple of reasons. There's less events, A, and B, for the most part, they don't do a lot of like the over-the-top programming that Dave Castro has programmed for the open division, like with all like the new toys and the body drags and a lot of the age group. If you look at back, you can go back on the game's website and look at all of the programming from previous workouts in the games. I always found that the Masters teams, the age groups, it's like so classic CrossFit, and it's really fun to watch them do that workout. And I think it's more relatable too to us, even though those guys are on a different level than us. It's still fun to watch because it's workouts for the most part you could do, just maybe not as fast.
I mean, I'm sure it holds more resonance for you because you actually did compete in the 35 to 39-year-old age group semifinals against some of these athletes who are now in the games.
Yeah.
The people who stick out to me in the age group in the Masters division is Sam Dancer.
Yep.
And I remember when I first heard of Sam Dancer, it was Terry Wyatt maybe like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm in love with his thighs. And I was like, who is this guy? So I looked at him, I was like, holy cow, I'm in love with his thighs. They're amazing.
I can't believe he can find shorts that can fit his legs inside of them.
The guy is a monster.
Yeah.
And I watched him clean and jerk 342 pounds and snatch, 225 plus in the age group semis. And this guy is so dynamic. He is not lost a step. And he's someone on the 35 to 39 that I can't wait to watch.
Yeah, and because he has not competed on the individual level since the games in 2019, I believe. I think that's the last time he competed. He had a baby a little over a year ago, so I think he took some time off. He was actually on a team. Let's see, here we go. Games. All right, so 2019, he was on a 7th place team. In 2018, he was on the 2nd place team. I remember that game. That was the year after Froning lost, and they came in with fire. And CrossFit Invictus X gave them a run for their money. In 2016, he came in 32nd place at the games. And it's funny, he was just recently asked on a podcast, hey, Sam, it seems like you're back in it. His training is very different than what it used to be. But he says he's feeling a little lighter and he feels better than he ever has. He's still, I would say, top 0.01% of strength within the sport, Masters and Open Division. And they asked him, what's your plan going to be next year? And he goes, I think I might give the Open Division a run again. I mean, he'll try to go back into the non-Masters division unless Richard, who is Rich Froning, comes into the Masters next year as an individual. Then Sam said, all right, I'll stay in if he stays.
Froning's been hinting about dropping from competition all year.
Yep.
So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
The two other women that I see on the Masters side that I'm going to follow is Chyna Cho on the 35 to 39, just because she's been on an individual and then on the team side for so long with Rich Froning. And then Becca Voigt Miller, I always have a soft spot for. She has qualified for the CrossFit Games every year since 2008. She's qualified 14 times, 10-time regional athlete, 2nd last year in the 40 to 44. She is so durable and she is very humble. And when you listen to her, she's basically, if you took an affiliate owner and gave them CrossFit superpowers for 14 years, like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I think there's two other angles to look at the age group. So I'm going to go on both sides of the spectrum here. I do think, okay, so we know that the age groups 35 to 39 and the 40 to 44, they probably are a little bit more entertaining to watch. A, we know the names, and B, just the capacity and strength levels are a little bit more. It's like watching Major League Baseball, minor league baseball. Everyone's very respectable in that. Like, everyone's high level, but if you have X amount of time, you're going to watch the higher level. I feel that way. Like, more people will watch the open division than the Masters division. But if you can find some time, watch the 65-plus-year-olds. It's not going to be like, wow, that is so fast. Wow, that is so heavy. But if you can if you know anyone that's 65 years old, and seeing these people do legless rope climbs and guys snatch 185 and women snatch 125 at that age, I think it would be really smart just to sit back and just appreciate how impressive that is, because I think they get overlooked a little bit at the games just because it's not the highest level at the games. But if you want to talk about the amount of respect that is given to these people and how hard it is to do what they're doing, just when you consider biology, I think that's something everyone should find some time just to watch at least one event of that.
They're very relatable. Last year when I was walking around, I talked to athletes, and they were mostly either under 18 or masters, because they're the ones that are sort of hanging out,
right?
Not the open athletes from 18 to 34. So
right.
I talked to a couple of the senior athletes in the 60-plus division, and they're just like us. Like, I would talk to them, and they're like, listen, I just want to go back to the hotel, rest, eat something,
yeah.
and I feel so beat up, and I could totally relate to them. They were so cool.
And I remember last year you texting me, you watched a teen female that was in the 17-year-old group, I think.
Olivia Kerstetter.
And she snatched something like
200 plus pounds.
Yeah, 205 or 210.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even do that. And what's cool about watching that division, again, if you have the time, and they will be aired. I don't think every one of their events will be aired or as easy to find, but it was announced that they would be aired. You're watching possibly the future CrossFit when you watch that. Like, it would be cool if you're going to follow this sport year after year. If you watched this years ago, you would have been watching G compete.
Mal O'Brien.
Yeah, Mal O'Brien.
Dallin Pepper.
They were all in that teen division. And it's almost like, again, I keep using my sport analogies here, but you can watch college football or minor league baseball sometimes, and maybe it's not the most fun thing in the world, but you can see the future of the sport and almost get like an inside track. And it's just, trust me, it's fun to watch someone from the beginning of their career to the end. And I just think it would be, if you're going to be in CrossFit for a long time and you'll give the game some attention year after year, give the teens a look at some point. Maybe look for one of the workouts that looks like it's fun to watch. And it's just, I think it's a good idea to just look for the future of the sport in that regard. I
love watching developing athletes like that. I do that a lot in basketball because I follow college basketball.
Yep.
And I saw Jason Tatum at Duke. And then now you see him on the Celtics and you see what he's done, and you're like, wow, that development, like you could see that raw talent early.
Yep.
And it's fun to see that raw talent early and say, wow, I wonder what this is going to be like in a couple of years.
Yep. And the skill set just isn't there yet. The skill set is what takes a long time, and just that's what takes time. But again, you could see talent. If you watch CrossFit enough or watch basketball enough, in Sam's analogy, if you watch enough basketball, you know what talent looks like. So in regard to the actual workouts, right, there's some that are fun to watch, there are some that are not. But last year, I hope they do this again, that the CrossFit Games, CrossFit created workouts that were gym, like box versions of every workout. Mm-hmm. And some are logistically doable for classes, most are not. Last year, they haven't announced if they're going to do that or whether or not they're going to do that this year. But if they do, I think that's something really fun to take on. Like, you and your gym, I know I'll do this. If those workouts come out at some point in the next week, I will try to program them throughout August. Remember last year we did the wall walk. Did you do that one? The wall walk thruster?
Oh, yeah.
It was almost half the reps of what the games did and a lot lighter. But again, it's cool. This goes back to the CrossFit methodology of we all felt the same way. And it's cool to know that, hey, this is where the games athletes pushed. This is where they fell apart. This is what was really tough. Hey, I have the same body type as that athlete and we struggled here, but we excelled in the other one. It's fun to do stuff like that. And I think it keeps you in tune. This is always a tough time of year. In the past week, I've had multiple conversations with people, like they're starting to feel like that, like burnt out. I feel like I'm in a lull. I can't get back into my normal routine. And we'll be back in a month or two. Don't worry, guys. But it's something fun to stimulate the mind a little bit. And it doesn't need to be like your top effort. You don't really need to care about your score. I just think I would encourage everyone to do that that once those workouts come out, or if we can, I'll do it myself if I can, make kind of gym versions of the workout, come in and do them.
Yeah, I remember that one because I was watching James Hobart in the Coliseum do that one.
Yep.
And him and the other Masters athletes, they were doing 185 pounds on those thrusters.
Yeah.
And they hit walls that you could not believe.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And then when I did it at a much lighter weight, I hit that wall too, but much sooner and with less capacity. And I was like, okay,
I get it. Yeah. I mean, how many times do we have that in workouts here where someone's like, oh, that workout doesn't look that bad, or that workout looks fun? Like yesterday's, the push press burpee was an example of that, or it didn't look that bad. I feel like a lot of our veteran CrossFitters knew that one was going to be bad.
Yeah.
But I just had a new guy. He started about 6 months ago. His name's Fred. He came up to me today and he was like, I'd learned something about CrossFit. And I was like, what? And he goes, whenever you see a workout with 2 movements, it's going to be really bad.
Smart man.
Yes, all couplets suck.
All couplets suck.
So yeah, I mean, those are our thoughts on the CrossFit Games, guys. I hope that we gave you some kind of guide on how to watch them and what you can get out of them, whether you're a fan of the sport or not. I think it's a great way to also show some support for CrossFit overall. It's still, we're like on a shaky ground right now with like the future CrossFit and the leadership. And I think one thing that CrossFitters do really well as a community is we all get behind the games. And whether we're trying to make that or not, it has nothing to do with it at all. It's just something to support and watch. So if you have some time, give it some views this weekend. Put yourself on YouTube, on their game site, on CBS on Sunday, and just give it a watch. And I think you will get something out of it. Sam, any last thoughts?
Absolutely. They track all of the metrics on who watches and who is involved. And that's why, for example, for us as masters, we always want people to get involved on the master side.
Yeah.
I think it helps. And I learn a lot every time I watch too.
Yep.
I love it.
Awesome. Cool. All right, guys. So we're next week, just, when we post this, we're not going to be posting a new podcast next week. I am going to have something for you on our Instagram that kind of just gives us a full, like, chapter by chapter, episode by episode. If you've ever missed any episodes of the HerdFit podcast, I will document which podcast covered which topics, and I'll list them on our Instagram, and then we'll be back probably around mid-August. And we have some exciting guests coming up from out of the state that have to do with the Legends competition. So we'll get a lot of that coverage going because those qualifiers are coming up for those that want to do it. And thanks. See you next time. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the HerdFit podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.